Imagine a world where people's minds are twisted and turned, where the truth is distorted, and reality podcasts and films, the Nazis crafted a mesmerizing narrative that fueled the flames of nationalism and hatred. The Germans were convinced that their nation was superior, that the Allies were barbaric, and that the war was a holy crusade. But what about the Allies? How did they use psychological manipulation to counter the Nazis' tactics? The British, in particular, took a keen interest in the art of psychological warfare, recognizing the devastating impact it had on German morale. Enter Dr. John Rawlings Rees, a British psychiatrist who played more subtle methods of psychological manipulation. By providing prisoners with a sense of normalcy and routine, the Allies aimed to maintain the prisoners' dignity and resilience. This approach, though seemingly innocuous, had a profound impact on the prisoners' mental health and well-being. As we continue to unravel the dark art of psychological manipulation in WW2, it becomes clear that both the Nazis and the Allies employed this strategy with devastating consequences. The Nazis, in their quest for control and domination, unleashed a torrent of psychological manipulation that ravaged the German people and created a legacy of hatred and division. The Allies, on the other hand, recognized the power of psychological manipulation and used it to their advantage. becomes clear that psychological manipulation was a deliberate strategy employed by both the Nazis and the Allies to gain an upper hand in the war. The Nazis, in particular, took this concept to an unprecedented level, harnessing the power of psychological manipulation to control the German population and suppress dissent. Pause for emphasis. But what about the Allies? How did they use psychological manipulation to counter the Nazis' tactics? The British, in particular, took a keen interest in the art of psychological warfare. And gunfire echoed through the corridors. This was the reality for thousands of prisoners, forced to live in squalor and fear. The Nazis used every trick in the book to manipulate their captives, from starvation and sleep deprivation to physical torture and psychological games. But what about the prisoners who managed to resist the Nazis' psychological manipulation? There were many who refused to give in, who found ways to maintain their dignity and their sense of self in the face of unimaginable cruelty. One such group was the French resistance. The Nazis' actions as a threat, not just to her country, but to humanity itself. She wrote extensively about her experiences in the resistance, and her words continue to inspire people to this day. But what about the long-term effects of psychological manipulation on prisoners of war? The experiences of those who were held captive their lives, a testament to the enduring power of psychological manipulation. Did you know that over 70 of prisoners of war who were exposed to psychological torture suffered from PTSD, compared to just 20 of those who were not? The effects of psychological manipulation can last a lifetime, causing anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. It's a reminder that the damage caused by psychological torture is not just physical, but emotional and psychological as well. The Nazis' use of psychological manipulation during WW2 was a deliberate attempt to break the human spirit. They saw their prisoners as nothing more than tools to be used and discarded, and they used every trick in the book to achieve their goals. But the prisoners themselves were not just passive victims, they were active participants in their own resistance, fighting against the Nazis' attempts to break them. As we look back on the horrors of WW2, we can learn valuable lessons about the dangers of psychological manipulation. We see that the Nazis' use of propaganda were held captive. As the war raged on, the psychologists behind the Nazi regime were busy perfecting the art of manipulation. They knew that the key to winning the war lay not in brute force, but in the power of the human mind. And so, they set out to study the psychology of manipulation, using the latest research and techniques to influence soldiers, civilians, and prisoners alike. Meet the concept of social influence, which refers to the way in which groups before. Meet the experts who are working to combat the use of psychological manipulation in modern society. These individuals are using their knowledge of social influence and psychological manipulation to develop new strategies for countering the spread of misinformation and propaganda. By understanding the psychology behind manipulation, they hope to create a more informed and critical public. But what about the final lesson from WW2? What can we learn from the Nazi regime's use of psychological manipulation? An estimated 6 million people died as a direct result of the Nazis' use of psychological manipulation. The sheer scale of this number is a sobering reminder of the power of the human mind when manipulated for evil purposes. But what about the final lesson from WW2? The Nazis didn't just use manipulation to harm their enemies, they used it to control and deceive even their own soldiers, turning them into unwitting instruments of terror. One of the most striking examples of psychological manipulation in WW2 we must heed, lest we repeat the mistakes of the past. Let us honor the victims by staying informed, critically evaluating information, and taking action against the manipulation of public opinion. We owe it to ourselves, our children, and future generations to resist the insidious forces of psychological manipulation and to fight for a world where truth and critical thinking prevail.